Coming up on this episode, I talk about growing pains, how this can show up in many forms in life, and just how acknowledging these growing pains can help you to better move forward in your life. So let's get into it. What's going on, beautiful people? This is the Perspective Chasers podcast, and I'm your host, John. On this episode, I want to talk about growing pains. Now, this is going to take many forms in life, but the overall idea is that whenever you're growing, no matter what aspect in your life there's going to be things that you have to shed, whether it be the idea of yourself, the idea of people around you, or your just understanding in general. There's normally something that you have to let go of in order to grow. Now, that's not always going to be pleasant. Sometimes it means saying goodbye to friends that you've known for years, simply because they're not on the path that you're on anymore, or they're on a different path to you, whichever way you want to look at it. But it's not always going to be easy. There's things that you're going to have to do to grow that ain't going to be nice, that are going to feel lonely, you're going to feel lost, you're in uncharted waters a lot of the time. Like I've spoken about before, like sometimes when you're on that journey of discovery, it is lonely as anything, because nobody else is out there looking for it. Nobody's treading the path that you're treading. It's down to you to put in the work and find out where it goes. It's not to say it's going to be easy though. Like, I struggle even as much as I've worked on my kind of how much I socialize lately, and I get to see people a lot more than I did previously, and I feel great for it, but at the same time, there's still work that needs to be done. And all of these friendships and all of these things in life are temporary. So there may come a time that people that I hold near and dear now, I no longer hold near and dear in the future. It's happened before. I'm pretty sure it will happen again. But there will be some people that stay in your life consistently, so don't let that be a deterrent to having people in your life. But the thing is, they will change over time. And sometimes that's going to be painful. Sometimes it's going to be easy. But it's always going to happen. Things will always change. And the more you can understand that it's not personal, everybody's out living their life or doing their own thing, and so are you. It's normally the people that don't have much going on themselves that tend to get heavily involved in other people's lives. So if you're out there pursuing what you want to do and putting in the best effort for you, don't worry if people are hating, because they probably ain't got much going on themselves. But the fact is that if you keep focusing on, you push through the growing pains, you'll build something that is amazing. But it takes you to go through those growing pains and to become that person, because sometimes when you have an idea of something, you might be the person that had the idea, but it doesn't mean you're the person to execute it. And sometimes there's some growing that needs to happen in the meantime. Sometimes there's some learning that needs to happen. But no matter what, there's a journey to undergo. And not every journey is going to be nice. But it doesn't mean to resent it. There's parts of my life that have not been pleasant, and that's putting it mildly. But there's a lot that I learned in those situations, and there's a lot that was built in me in those situations. Any of the hard times that I've faced in my life, they've helped build the man that I am. And realistically, I wouldn't change any of them. And that's not to say that I wanted to go through those things. Believe me, I didn't. But I'm proud of the person that I've become. So if it means going through those things, then so be it. And having that realization gives me a sense of ease, in a sense. Where it's, yeah, I know I might be going through some A, B, or C. But it will pass. And once it passes, I'll still be there. So it's a lot easier to kind of to manage. I tend not to catastrophize things as much anymore, whereas I used to think everything was the be all and end all. Especially in terms of like the podcast and that, like if you used to go back to the earlier episodes, I'm far more uptight on my speech and don't always say what's on my mind, but the reality is I could probably say far worse than I currently do. I'd probably still get away with it. But I don't want to. Like, I think it's very important, the message and how you conduct yourself. So I would rather slowly ease up to building the ideal image than rush and just throw paint at the wall and put myself in a situation where I don't want to be in. I think everything should be spoken about, and that's not always the easiest thing because some people don't want to talk about certain aspects of life, and so be it. That's fine. But there's a way to get there, and that's what I'm trying to grow towards, is towards a point where I can talk about everything and anything with anybody. Because I think that's where value is. That's where there's going to be so much room to learn. But it takes time to get there. I had to be the guy that was awkwardly sitting in front of the camera at first before I got to the point where I was the guy that could sit down with anybody. I mean, at the minute, I'm the guy that's sitting down on my own. But it doesn't stop me losing sight of where I want to go or the ideas that I have. I just understand I'm not the person that can execute that yet. So I need to grow some more. That's fine. And like, it's not to say it's comfortable. Trust me, I wanted to record last night and I had no life in me. So I had to move it to today, and I'm ended up doing it last minute, but it's going to be better for it because my mind's a bit more coherent. And it's not all there at the minute. Again, I'm still very lost in a lot of aspects, but I'm together enough that I can do this and I can put out hopefully what I feel is going to be valuable to somebody, because I know this is something that I struggle with, is knowing when to allow yourself to feel that growing pain. So like last night, I was going to force myself to do extra work and this, that and everything else. But instead, for the first time in a long time, I listened to my body and let my body go to sleep when it wanted to. And I had a great sleep and I woke up nice and early before my alarms, just naturally. But that wouldn't have happened if I didn't listen to my body. If I didn't understand that, cool, you've been pushing it a bit much, like you are just generally fatigued, to take your foot off the gas. If I didn't actually listen to myself and listen to my body and accept the fact of my limits and the fact that the growing is taking its toll, then I would have got even more down in the dumps today and ended up in likely a worse position today. But thankfully I've managed to bounce back and I feel pretty good today. But again, it's running that constant check on yourself. How are you doing? Are you fatigued? Are you run down? Da 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 da. It's all part of growing and developing. It's never going to be a smooth trajectory. You can't let it dishearten you. Like, I didn't let the fact that I wasn't up to recording last night turf the pod. Like, it's just last night I weren't feeling great. Like, there was things I could have done to counteract it and this, that and everything else. But again, things still continue. Even the other day I had problems with getting locked out of my account and this, that and everything else. And again, I catastrophized and da 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 da. It wasn't until I took 5 and kind of recalibrated and knew where I was going, where I was able to get things in order and everything else. But again, that's because when I first started, I didn't set everything up properly. It was more playing around in the dark, trying to figure it out. And I spent so much time focusing on pushing things forward that I never went back and buttoned up the back end. So it caught up with me, and eventually it caused me a problem. So again, sometimes those problems and those, i.e. growing pains, they're because you neglected something previously. So that growing that you need to do is just becoming a little bit more, due diligent and a little bit more strict in the processes and actually going back and fixing up the things that you need to fix up, because it's always gonna come back to bite you if you ignore it. And I had to learn that lesson the hard way. It nearly cost me the channel, but I managed to get everything back together and on track, and I learned something valuable from it. So now any channel I set up in future, and obviously anything that I do in that regard in future, I'm going to put a lot more effort and emphasis on actually setting it up properly from the get-go, so I have no problems on the back end. But again, it's all part of growing and figuring it out. If I never started in the first place, I'd have never learnt that lesson. So I had to start the pod in order to learn how to manage the pod. But it's all part and parcel of learning anything. You're going to fail, you're going to mess up, and so be it. Learn from it and move on. There's no shame in it. There's no shame in making mistakes. It's part of life. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this episode up there. The seed for this episode is going to be, look to see what your growing pains are. But look to see where you're trying in life and you're feeling the effects of it. And again, just acknowledging it can help you realize, like, okay, cool, like, I understand why I'm extra tired, because I'm putting in extra work so I can save more money, or this, whatever it is. Like, once you can rationalize it, and once you can understand that it's a byproduct of what you're doing, it's not uncalled for necessarily, it's a lot easier to accept it and take it in your stride. But you have to take that moment to actually look at it and recognize it. But you'll get there. We all will, as long as you're trying. So don't resent the struggle, don't resent the growing pains. It's all part of the journey. All the best, and I'll catch you on the next one.